This is Three Brothers Movie Reviews, and we just saw Captain Marvel. The film stars Brie Larson, Samuel L. Jackson, and Jude Law, and it is about a Kree soldier named Veers, who on a mission is stranded on Earth. And on Earth, she is trying to fight off these aliens called the Skrulls, who can mutate to look like any living being, and she happens to run into Nick Fury, and the two of them get into a massive conflict trying to evade the alien invasion. So Captain Marvel, like, it's fine. Like, I think the fuss is like kind of making this something which is not, but like as a film, I think all around the table we're just like, it's fine. I think we have different thoughts in between, but just yeah. So what do you think, Daniel, overall? Like, what's your basic thoughts?
I think that it was funny. I watched Shazam before I saw this movie, and what's funny is I liked Shazam, but I think that a lot of the critiques that I had for Shazam also carry over to this movie. And strangely enough, a lot of things I like in Shazam also carry over to this movie.
Ironic, too, because they were both technically named Captain Marvel.
Ironically, because both these characters at one point were Captain Marvel. But one of the things that I liked the most about this movie is there are scenes where the action slows down, and I think that the easiest thing to compare it to is in Avengers Age of Ultron, a movie that is constantly in motion. There's a moment where you go to Hawkeye's farm.
They just slap it on there.
And you just spend 20 minutes there. And you get a lot of great scenes between characters, and there's interactions, and things just kind of slow down. And it's a welcome relief, because you realize you've been just burning through the movie at top speed. There's been good stuff at that point, but you realize that you feel like you've been rushing a lot of it.
Yeah, a lot of the character development has been rushed.
So I think that there are scenes where things slow down, and I like those things. I think that there's some really good performances in this movie. I really liked Ben Mendelsohn in the movie. He plays the Skrull leader Talos. He was surprisingly interesting for a character that, unfortunately, Ben Mendelsohn has sort of been pigeonholed as the very screechy, shouty bad guy.
Yeah.
But I actually really liked him in this movie. He was really funny, and I thought that the scenes that he was in were probably the better scenes of the plot of the movie. Because I think there's sort of a plot of the movie which is tied to like the Kree Skrull War, what's going on with S.H.I.E.L.D. back in the 90s. That's kind of the plot, whereas the story is Carol Danvers is trying to discover who she is. I think that unfortunately the story of Carol Danvers, which should be the high point of the movie, struggles because I think maybe partially script issues, partially the way they piece it together. That was the thing that I felt was lacking the most, is at the end of the day, the stuff that I remember has more to do with the plot, has more to do with the characters that aren't Carol. And there's not really a moment where I was like, okay, this is Captain Marvel and I understand. And it was a bummer because I was left wanting more from that.
It runs a little too fast for its own good.
Yes.
Even though there are great moments, yeah. Gavin?
A lot of it I thought was either meh or just kind of bad. I don't really have much nice to say about Captain Marvel, or nothing that's really either too terrible either. It just kind of felt like the writers weren't really doing as much as they could have been. It just wasn't much meat and bones there. It was just kind of a bone-dry script that had a bit of fun comedy in it at some points, but the comedy was hit or miss for me. And I don't know, it just seemed very bone dry and not very great. I don't think Captain Marvel herself is a very good character. She has doesn't have a defined character arc. She's not a very defined personality. She just seems like she exists, and that's okay. I honestly don't have much nice to say about this movie, and nothing that terrible either. It's just there. It exists.
So, not happy.
Not really happy with it. It seems like a very rushed movie that could have had a lot of good potential, but it kind of squanders it just to maybe produce it out there. I don't know. Not a big fan. Right now.
What do you think?
I described this to you, and it's the most interesting thing I've ever seen. I think that the character development in this movie is fine. Like, I enjoy what they did with the characters. And when I walked away, I'm like, these characters were interesting, what they did with them. And I realized that all of the scenes with them were kind of clunky. They were rushed. They didn't have very good dialogue. But they were still well developed. And I was like, what's going on here? Why is a movie with not too great scenes have decent development? And I don't really know how to describe that, but that's kind of the entire movie. It's like rushed the way it's put together. It doesn't have like, you know, proper pacing or like good development with the characters, but the movie still functions. Like somehow it still pulls things together, and even though it might not hit great emotional highs or even like serious lows, there's nothing that's really offensive or like overtly bad in the movie, it still manages to just pull it off. It pulls it off, and it doesn't do anything extraordinary, but it still suffices. It suffices, and it's, you know, it works for what it is. So
it's functional. It's not necessarily memorable.
Exactly. That's the best way that I can describe it. So yeah.
Yep.
You want to get into positives and negatives here? Let's. What's an outstanding positive you want to talk about?
I was really surprised that in a movie that didn't really surprise me with some of its big like ooh moment. Like there's a scene in Captain America: The Winter Soldier where there's a couple scenes where there's a couple of big reveals that are pretty neat.
Yeah.
I think that this movie tries that twice. They didn't surprise me with either twist, but there was one twist that did surprise me. And I thought it was actually a very nice, small, contained twist. Once again, I think that the best parts about this movie were when they slow down and just have quieter moments with the characters.
Yeah.
And there was a small moment that I was like, that's really nice. I didn't expect that, and that was neat. I think that the stuff with Nick Fury was fun.
Yeah.
I thought that Sam Jackson was... I never noticed the CGI. The fact that they de-aged him. This is the first time where they de-aged an actor, and I never noticed it.
He looked just like he did in like Patriot Games, or like a Die Hard of the Vengeance. Like it's scary how much he looks like he did in the 90s. It's just
it's really fascinating because I don't think I've seen an actor de-aged in any movie as effectively as this was. And he was really good. He was funny. He was charming. I mean, there's moments with them where you're just like, I just like watching Sam Jackson work.
Yeah, like again with the whole dialogue thing, like it doesn't even matter so much what he's saying. Like Sam Jackson can pull it off if they just like let him be himself, and he's interesting. He's a little bit of a goofball in this movie. You could call that an out of character aspect, but he's still
young.
Fun.
He's in the 90s. He's not
like a fully developed Fury, but he's still kind of there.
Yeah.
He's just kind of a younger, cockier kind of version of Fury.
Yeah, and I think on your point about like the fact that Carol doesn't really have a clearly defined arc, I think that is definitely an issue with the movie. One thing that I did like is I thought Carol had a very clearly defined attitude that did stick through the whole movie, and it was a neat attitude. It was basically like
snarkiness. That's how I describe it.
Not even snarky, but it was. She likes to kind of basically chase trouble down. Like there's this early scene where I think it's right at the beginning. She wakes up from a dream and she goes to Jude Law and she's like, I can't sleep. You want to fight?
Yeah.
Like that's basically kind of her attitude is like she's not really like slowing down, dealing with she's definitely not like, oh, woe is me, I am troubled. She's like, I had a bad dream. Let's punch each other. Like she just kind of like gets into fight. She's the person that will start she's the person that's going to start a fight in a bar. Just see what happens.
Yeah.
So I think that my hope is that in a future movie, hopefully Avengers Endgame, they can sort of build on that defined attitude and build in more of a clear character arc for that person. Because I think that it is a weakness of the movie that she doesn't really have this is where the character starts, this is where the character ends. But I did like the fact that she had an attitude that is unique amongst the many Avengers characters that we've had at this point.
And there's a point in the movie where Fury literally says, like, you must have a personal stake in this, in this like war. And she just kind of doesn't answer the question. And I'm like, good question, Fury. I don't really see a very personal stake in this. She doesn't really have a very big emotional battle to conquer. She just kind of stays the same way, which I guess is fine for one movie, but if they develop it later in say the Endgame, and I hope they do. I hope we can get a bit more of her character and see maybe a better character arc and story for her.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what did you think was a positive of this movie? I know that you've been pretty rough on it so far.
Pretty
What did you
negative
like?
so far.
Come on, say
Gavin.
something nice.
I'm trying to think here. Someone go before me. I'm sorry. I need to think about a positive.
E-Man.
Honestly, I think one of the best is the world building. Like, I laughed at how, like, the movie that I was comparing this to was Solo. Like,
Right.
I honestly despise that movie. Like, I like The Last Jedi, I'm not a fan of it, and I've been very vocal about that. But Solo, for me, is like kind of the worst sin a film can commit. It's forgettable and it's boring. For me, at least. Like, I don't know how to quantify it exactly, but for me, that movie was a prequel which was trying to answer questions that no one wanted answered and no one needed. And the way that it constructed it, it was just in the most bland, who gives a hell way, where they're just like, it felt like no one cared. Everyone was just like, let's just make money.
Right.
This movie didn't feel like it was offensive to any previous movies, and like the way it constructed its world as a prequel, it worked. Like there's continuity. There's this massive one, like it. Let's just say involving Nick Fury. Like, if you've seen Captain America: The Winter Soldier, you probably know what I'm talking about. There's this little bit of exposition in there, stuff like that doesn't make any sense. It's in there. It's gonna be in there. It's a prequel, but like the movie, for the most part, like it builds its world fine. It answers questions that are just like, this is fine. And I'm like, I like that it builds its world okay. It takes place in the 90s, and it's a nice Avengers prequel. Like, that's one thing which I can say. I'm like, you did not screw up your world. Your world's just fine. Like, people have said this ruins stuff in the past. It really doesn't. It functions.
It fits well into what we've already seen. Like, it doesn't like just stand out like a sore thumb. Like, I agree with you. Solo's greatest sin is that it's boring. This movie's never boring.
No. And it's long, too. It works pretty well for that. So
I was surprised when we got out of the theater. I was like, holy cow, it was like 2 hours and 20 minutes. Like, it didn't feel that long.
Yeah. Your number's up, Gavin.
I figured out 2 things that I liked.
Oh, I got 2.
I feel proud of myself. We kind of went already on this, but I do like Samuel Jackson's performance. He can scrape up anything, and it's delightful to me to see Samuel Jackson kind of just open act and be himself and just kind of be fun and nice. Like, there's a point where someone in an elevator calls him by his first name, and he just kind of looks at him like,
He just gives this little, like,
I remember
head
that.
turn. It's like so good. He's set up with the dialogue too,
yeah, and he has nice dialogue, and he's a fun character, and like kind of like the cockier version of Nick Fury. Like when he confronts Carol at the beginning when she's on like a payphone, and he's like, "Oh, you're from another planet, right?" and it's fun to see this kind of condescending version of him, and someone who's a bit younger. And another thing that I liked the geography that they set up, some of the set pieces that they had. Oh, yeah. Because in one scene, there's like this hallway that lights up, and there's like kind of a hide and seek in this, because you have to like go into a corridor for it to light up, and there's a nice little kind of like cat and mouse chase inside of there where they're like lighting up certain things and making it go away. So there are fun set pieces which have a unique feel to them and are really nice. Yeah. So, 2 positives that I think are very solid in this movie.
Yeah, production design's pretty solid in this movie. Like, I was like, there's a lot of subtle stuff. Like, I think the reviews I was reading were definitely leaning into like, this movie makes too many 90s references. Like, they do sometimes.
I'd like to talk about that because seriously,
but
like
they didn't ever feel like in your face about it.
No.
Like, a lot of the music is well used. Not towards the end. I think towards the end they definitely lean too far into it to where it doesn't really add to the scene. It sort of takes away from it. But a lot of the stuff that just kind of is part of the movie, it actually is like it's well put into it.
Like, there's a reference that is made like clearly at the beginning that it's Toy Story. It's like it's a reference that's made.
I loved that. I immediately whispered to Gavin.
I could see it too, even with you not whispering. But I swear, like they could have made that more hammy. They could have made that more like, hey, look, it's Toy Story. But it's like for the people who've seen it, they'll understand. For the people who don't, they might not catch it. So like, there's stuff like that where the references aren't overt. Like, hey, you like this, or
I understood that reference.
They let you pick up on it.
Yeah.
They don't try to like. They don't stop the movie to make the reference.
Exactly. Yeah. It never just crawls anything to a halt. So yeah, the references are fine. Yeah. Do you want to get into negatives here? Like a decent transition? Okay, I'm going to talk...
I'll let you guys go first before I start spitting negatives.
I'm going to go first with a very specific one.
I
think that the musical score for this film is bad. I think, like, appropriately... I've said this before. I've spoken out against Marvel scores. I think for the most part, they can be generic. Some of them don't work. Some of them really do work. I think that the Captain America movies have good ones. I like Thor Ragnarok. But for the most part, musical scores for Marvel movies can blend. And I'm like, this is a movie where the fact that it has a generic musical score is like, it ruins scenes where there should be like crescendo moments. Like there's this moment at the end, like where Carol like gets all this power and is like doing these amazing things, and the music is just so standard. It's just safe. And I'm like, you can't be safe with the music. You can try with the rest of the film and it'll work, but in these moments where there should be these high points emphasized by the music, or at least by like the sound effects, there's just nothing except just even music. And I'm like, you can't really do that in a movie like this, and for me that was something which kind of ruined some of the action sequences, especially towards the third act. So
it feels like the score is meant for a smaller movie.
Yeah,
like there's music in the movie that I liked.
It reminded me of Tron Legacy. Some of the nice moments with like technological, especially in the first act. Like I like that. Like third act had trouble, but yeah, there's pieces that work, and like maybe not a
good music, but not for this movie.
Exactly,
it would be better in a movie that's smaller in scale and doesn't have to give you those moments where all of a sudden you have like massive space battles.
Yeah, so just a specific thing. Like it's not even all that big. And again, I don't really have any massive like grievances with this film. Like it's the worst thing I can say about this movie is it's safe. It's just it doesn't really take any big risks, and it doesn't really have any massive like low points. It's just conventional, and for the most part it works well. So
yeah, I think that my biggest critique of the movie is that it handicaps its lead character by forcing the audience to learn more about the character strictly through their flashbacks to memories they're piecing together slowly, rather than you learning more about the character as they are trying to learn more about themselves.
We were talking about this. There is a scene basically early on where Carol is captured and they are like infiltrating her mind essentially, and the people who are looking through are just like, hey, you're going through the wrong memory. Like they go through like 19 and like it's just like,
and those memories aren't even like close to the ones they're actually trying to get.
Yeah, they're like bouncing back between years of their life.
Something.
I'm like, these guys are bad at their jobs. But like it's stuff like that where like it's not really like the film is relying solely on the exposition to like give us information about the character, but they do rush through a lot of it.
Yeah, we were talking about The Bourne Identity. The Bourne Identity is about a movie that, from the beginning, a character who has lost their memory, they don't know who they are, they don't know what they were meant to do, but they know some of the functional things about themselves. And as you go through the movie with Jason, you learn more about him through his actions. There are flashbacks, but that's not solely your way of learning who he is. You learn who he is by his actions in the now. And I think this movie could have been better served by really showing more about who Carol is through her actions now, and then the flashbacks can essentially piece together who she was to tie into who she is now.
Exactly, yeah. So some trouble there with like how it puts together its story, which can cripple the main character, but hopefully that's resolved in Avengers Endgame. And again, like you can't rely on another movie be like, hey, they're gonna answer it in this, but like I think for this it worked, but maybe it had a little more potential. So
yeah, you know enough that going into Avengers, you know who Carol is, and it's not going to feel like jarring that she shows up all of a sudden.
Yeah. Be gentle.
I don't want to rage. Just want to be nice. This is calm. Let's start out with one thing. The writing in this movie, it either seems three things. It either seems lazy, contrived, or embarrassing. There's no point where it seems either good or like flat out terrible. It's just either one of those three. Another point that I would like to point out is that Brie Larson acting is really bad. I know that she's good in like Room.
I've
and
seen
she's-
Room,
she
by the way.
has
Like, a lot of
acting
people
potential.
like
You
ignore that
brought up
on
a good
online.
point where you thought the script might be crippling her. I definitely agree with that. There are a lot of lines which are very hammy and don't give her a lot of room to emote. But I still think she could have done something with it instead of nothing. There's a little kid in it who can't act to save her life. And
Who wasn't given a script that's going to give her enough character to save her life, Gavin?
And
Admit it, the script crippled her.
my biggest problem with the movie, Captain Marvel has no distinct character arc. She has nothing that gives her motivation. She doesn't have to work for anything. She doesn't have to earn anything. She simply is the way she is at the beginning all the way through the end. She doesn't have anything to learn. She doesn't have anything to gain. She doesn't have any emotional connection with the conflict. All that she has is this physical conflict, which is nice, but you need some emotion and something to change within her, within the script. Instead, she doesn't. And the movie was making up like she is emotional and she needs to control her emotions. And at the end of the movie, she doesn't. And she's like, no, I don't have to do that. Screw you. And I'm like, okay, that's a wasted character arc.
Gavin, like, I think to connect back with this, I think you and I talked about this before. I think that her arc is internal. It's an emotional character arc, and like you said, like her hero's journey happened in the past. Those are the flashbacks.
The strongest scene of her actually as a character happens in a flashback.
Yes.
But
Which
I think
you can say what you will about that for like storytelling, but
Right.
still, that's true. Like the flashbacks and all that, that's her arc, and that's completed in a scene before like the action starts.
But in the
Right.
story
So-
that we have right now, the conflict that we have, there's no defined character arc for the Carol that we know.
And I
There's-
agree with
there's
that.
a-
Physically,
there's
there's
a sort of character arc in the past, but not in the story that the movie's telling.
Yeah.
I could side with that. Yeah.
like a character arc is essentially the character starts here at point A, and then the character ends their journey here at point B.
And it's the stuff in between that like
It's the
changes
stuff
the
in between
character.
that changes that. And there's plenty of ways to make that journey interesting. This movie, I think, it sort of shoots itself in the foot because the journey already happened, and she's learning about that journey through the movie.
And there's the thing, you brought up a good point with the Bourne identity, where like someone doesn't really know a lot about their past, but they still have a defined character arc in the Bourne identity. I don't want to give a lot of spoilers for those who haven't seen it, but he has a distinguished A and B thing. He has one place where he doesn't know, but he still has a defined personality, and he ends the movie at point B where he changes. in a way.
And in every single Bourne movie, you know, except Jason Bourne.
Yeah, and the character
Don't
and
mention
his
that
journey.
movie in this review.
And his journey in every Bourne movie, it's not separate from him learning more about himself in the past.
It builds.
But it stands on its own that in the here and now, even though I don't know everything about myself, this is where I started, this is where I've ended. In every Bourne movie, except for the fourth one, there's a clearly defined beginning, middle, and end of where that character goes.
Yeah, and it builds the entire trilogy. That's what makes it such a
does.
great trilogy. Yeah. So, yeah.
No, I think it's strange. We're
I think
strangely all on the same page here.
I think so. I'm curious what our grades will be, but yeah, I think we all kind of agree that this movie could have been better if it had made a few more choices. But overall, like it's the worst sin this movie commits is being inoffensive. It's just safe.
Yeah.
And I think overall, like it could have taken more risks, and there probably would have been more reward. But as it is, it works. So
Yep.
yeah. Grade for you, Daniel?
I was thinking about this. I was really debating between a couple of grades, and it's funny because I'm thinking back because you two haven't seen Shazam yet, but I'll be interested for you guys to see it because I've been debating my own grade for that movie. I think I'm gonna go with. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with a C+ for this movie. I was debating going with a B-, but I think I'm gonna go for a C+, mainly because there's a lot of things I like about this movie, but one of the things that's always important to me in a movie is character.
Yes.
And I think that the movie excels in a lot of areas. I think what you pointed out about world building, especially like in world building, in plot, and in some of the supporting characters, there's a lot of stuff I like. But I think the movie definitely lacks a compelling lead character, particularly a character that seems to start in one area and end in another. So I would say C+. I don't mean that as a negative. It's not really a movie I feel very negatively towards, but I'm not going with the B- because I would generally give a B- to something that overall I enjoyed. So I think I'm just sort of middle of the road on this movie.
Yeah. Gavin?
Someone play the Palpatine. Do it.
Be cruel.
This movie's a D. This movie sucks. I hate it. I do not like this movie one bit at all. This does not feel like a good Marvel movie. This is not a good movie. Captain Marvel is a bad character who is very poorly written. This plot is contrived, lazy, and downright embarrassing. This movie should not deserve anyone's time. It is a terrible film, and you do not need to see it to see Endgame. Skip this movie, go see Endgame, because that will probably be a much better film. This movie's a D.
Tell us how you really feel, Gavin.
Aggressive actions. Let the hate flow
You were saying that we were about on the same page, but I'm like, I don't think so. We're in the negative realm.
You were holding back on us, man.
Mercy Moses me. Probably had a little too much to say. After that note, I just find this movie fine. Like, seriously, like, Solo for me is just like, that's the gauge that I would put as a prequel that is just wrong in pretty much every way I can imagine. But I'm like, this movie, I guess I was expecting a little more based on all of like the fuss people were making online, all the stuff with Rotten Tomatoes. That's a story in itself to be told, but the film is the film.
Yeah.
And like, I just don't have anything really overtly negative to say about this film, because it's all just like I said, all the stuff with the character development, the scenes don't work, but the character development does, and like that's the entire movie.
Right.
Aspects don't work, all of it doesn't work, but the film, like, you still feel like stuff has happened. So yeah. I'm just middle of the road, same as you. I don't hate this movie, but it's not very good in my book. It's middle of the road and just stative, and I'm gonna give it a C+, same as Dan. It's nothing great, but it's also nothing offensive, so except for Gavin. Yeah, okay. I you know, maybe see it. I guess so.
Yeah, I definitely. I'm glad I saw it. I'm happy. I'm happy that we all went to see it. I mean, I think that I unfortunately put off watching this movie because I definitely fell into the trap of sort of buying what was being sold about this movie, and I definitely regret kind of swallowing that up. So this movie is definitely completely separate from anything that's been said about it. As a movie itself, it's gonna give you I think what it was trying to do, and I'm glad I saw it because I now know a little more about the character before I go into see Endgame.
Yeah.
So
I'd honestly recommend it before Endgame if you want to know a little more about the character, and like if not, like I might not recommend seeing it in theaters. Like if Endgame came out later, I probably would recommend like seeing it when it comes out.
Yeah, there's an end credit scene to this movie that I'm pretty certain is going to be an Endgame.
Yeah.
So there's probably going to be
that scene was directed by the Russo brothers. So.
It doesn't surprise me. So I'm pretty certain that even in Endgame, there's probably going to be enough of an introduction to the character where you're probably going to learn enough that you may not need to see the movie, but it's up to you.
Yeah. So. All right. Thank you so much for watching. This is Three Brothers Movie Reviews, and please subscribe to the channel for more videos in the future.
See you guys.
See ya.
See ya.